Tell me if the stable Ringo's here.
Might be. You friend of his?
Sorta. Is he inside?
I'm Ringo. What can I do for you?
Well, my name's Merlin, Pat Merlin. This is my son, Hank. We come a long way, Mr. Ringo. The boy here's gonna kill you.
Part of what makes the Tombstone story so amazing is the characters that populate it. There's so many just incredibly interesting people. Wyatt Earp with his remarkable courage, Doc Holliday with his combination of frailties and toughness. The women are so interesting. One of the characters who is certainly the most interesting in this group is a man named John Ringo. And he's somebody who has been lifted and glorified and imagined in so many different ways. And part of the reason for that is that there are hints of reality in all the glorifications. You saw him in the movie Tombstone, and he's portrayed as a genius speaking Latin and going in different directions, and there's some truth to that. No, John Ringo didn't speak Latin, but he certainly was significantly smarter than most of the other rabble there, most of the cowboys, most of the other outlaws. He was a legitimate brain above everybody else. Very intelligent man. And this is part of the Ringo mystique of everything that goes on. The real John Ringo was, even in his own lifetime, he was somewhat glorified. His obits told of a man who was a big reader, smarter than everybody else. Billy Breckenridge glorified him to a degree and made him seem great. And he was built up and built up. There were bizarre stories that go with him. One writer imagined that he had been a college professor who went wrong and wound up in the Old West as an outlaw and various other things. Jack Burroughs, a college professor in San Jose, demystified Ringo and was able to find a lot of his background. It turns out that he wasn't a misguided college professor. In reality, he'd come across the plains from Indiana. His father had either accidentally shot himself or committed suicide along the way, and Ringo was apparently scarred. By the time he was a teenager, he was a big drinker. He was an alcoholic teenager, got rousted out of home, got sent to relatives in Texas to try and get himself straight. And instead of getting himself straight, he winds up as a killer in the Mason County War and gets involved in many difficulties, serves a little bit of time as a lawman, time in jail, in and out, troublemaker, problem causer, gradually finds himself moving on to Arizona territory. And so John Ringo comes in among the outlaws of the Old West. And you have to remember that what happened in Tombstone was so many of the outlaws of the West migrated in and came to southern Arizona. They had been outlaws in Texas, outlaws in Oklahoma, outlaws in other places, Indian Territory, of course. And they migrated their way into southern Arizona and became troublemakers. So that's how this big band of outlaws formed in Cochise County. Ringo was among those who came in, and he was kind of a natural leader. He was smarter than everybody else, as I said, and so people just looked at him and took to him. But what may be the most interesting comment on Ringo, one writer who interviewed a lot of the old timers said, "It's not about what John Ringo's done, it's about what he might do." And I think most of us have met somebody in their lives who you look at and you think, oh my God, that person has an edge about them. And it may have been in high school that you met them, it may have been at work, but there's somebody who just has an edge about them where you look and you say, oh my God, I want to stay out of that person's way because this is a person who might flip out and I don't want to be there when he flips out. So that was the sort of image that Ringo portrayed, and I mean, that's quite an image. He scared people, he was intimidating, and he just had this stern image above everybody else. And so you get to Tombstone, and we have all these unusual events happening in Tombstone, some of which we know, some of which we don't. And Ringo's not always in the middle of them, but often, if not in the middle, off to the side. He's believed to be among the cattle rustlers in so many different ways. He's looked upon as being a leader of the outlaw group. When the time comes that the Earps are in jeopardy, he's the one lodged across the street. When the gunfight, what's called the gunfight at the OK Corral occurs, Ringo is not there, he's away, but not long after, a number of things happen where he's in the middle of things. He's lodged in the hotel across the street, always with an eye on the Earps, always looking to the Earps. He's the one who looks to be the man ready to cause trouble. Finally, the fight comes where they're in the middle of the street, and Doc Holliday and Ringo have words of some sort, and all of a sudden Doc Holliday and Ringo get involved in that fight. It's been portrayed so many times. We don't know the exact details. I mean, it has been romantically told as a handkerchief fight, but where they hold the ends of a handkerchief and try and do it, but that's probably not true, but it has been described as such. And so it has been, but somehow, some way, Doc Holliday and John Ringo got into a skirmish. Now, we've always tried to understand what that's about. Was it spontaneous? Were there difficulties between the two? What led to the problems? And I think we're going to do a quick break. We've always tried to understand what was the animosity between Doc and Ringo. What was the trouble there? And I don't think anybody had a real understanding until Jack Burrows and I were digging through material that he had been given and had researched. And all of a sudden we found a memoir from Kate, Doc Holliday's sometimes wife, sometimes girlfriend. And we had this memoir from Kate. And all of a sudden Kate describes Ringo as being this remarkable man, the best friend she ever had. And she tells how Ringo gave her the money to leave Tombstone while Doc's in jail. And imagine this. I mean, just think of this. It's after the gunfight. Doc Holliday goes to jail. Holliday and Wyatt Earp are placed in jail. Virgil Earp and Morgan Earp are wounded, so they're allowed to stay out. But Wyatt and Doc are sitting in jail. And up in Doc's room, his wife, the woman who is living under the name Kate Holliday, is being visited by John Ringo, the chief of the outlaws, the most dangerous of the outlaws. So, according to Kate, Ringo came up to visit her, told her that she wasn't safe in town, and Ringo actually gave her the money to leave town. I mean, what amazing people they were. So Doc's girl, was there something romantic between Ringo and Kate? She doesn't tell us. Was there something previous, something later? But she says, John Ringo was the best friend we ever had, and John Ringo had tried to kill her husband. So we have all these amazing people. John Ringo After the attempted assassination of Virgil Earp and the assassination of Morgan Earp, John Ringo is the leading suspect for the shootings, and Wyatt Earp leads his posse out chasing John Ringo, and through a series of strange events, another deputy named John Henry Jackson's out there and all that. You'll know all this from the book, but Ringo and Ike Clanton came in and surrendered themselves to Behan so they wouldn't be caught by either Earp or John Henry Jackson. And so they're taken to jail, and almost immediately Ringo's let loose because they don't have the evidence to hold Ringo. So Ringo's just turned loose, and shortly after that, Ike Clanton, and if you can believe this, Ike Clanton's hat was found at the site from which Morgan Earp was assassinated, and Ike Clanton's not enough in the preliminary hearing. There's not enough evidence to bind him over. So you've got Ringo and Ike Clanton being turned loose when the Earps think there's clearly enough evidence to show they were involved in the killing. So it continues with this is all available, but it continues back and forth and going on. And one of the most amazing moments of the story, after the assassination of Morgan, Wyatt Earp sends an emissary to Ike Clanton saying, let's end it. Let's end it right here. Let's stop the hostilities. And Ike refuses. Ike simply refuses to end the hostilities. So it continues with back and forth, killings, murders. Ringo somehow stays alive, but so many of his friends are gone. And there are various descriptions of John Ringo and what happens to him, how he becomes sad, morose, his life has changed. And imagine this, we're talking about a man who's killed people, a different sort of a man. Near the end in the middle of 1882, John Ringo gets on the train, takes a trip to San Jose, California to see his sisters and to talk to his family and to try and reestablish the bonds of his childhood. He comes there, his sisters refuse to see him. I mean, at this time, there are stories in the Bay Area papers about John Ringo and the outlaw and various other things. And his sisters, his proper school teacher sisters, intelligent, respected in the community, refuse to see him. So he takes his picture and sends his picture to his sisters, gets back on the train, goes back to Tombstone, and within a few months, he rides off into the hills, drinks a copious amount of whiskey, and in all likelihood killed himself. There's controversy. Did Ringo kill himself? Did someone come and kill him? Overwhelmingly, the strongest case is that John Ringo killed himself. But we don't know for sure. There's still enough questions that we ask. So there's John Ringo, one of the most interesting characters in the Old West, one of the most amazing people who's walked this area, and somebody that we don't look up to, but we certainly look at with interest, mystery, and a good deal of excitement.